Well, good evening, everyone. I'm WCIA meteorologist Jacob Dickey here, and we're going to be a little bit behind on our 10 o'clock newscast tonight. The basketball game made things run a little late there, so I thought I'd jump on and just kind of spend a little time talking about the risk for severe weather for Sunday here across central Illinois. I got another risk coming our direction, and this one again has the chance for tornadoes. The more data that I'm seeing and just knowing how these types of systems tend to lean, they can start to put down a number of tornadoes in a quick hurry and go from being, 30 minutes ago, not much, to 30 minutes later, we've got some pretty big problems out there. So that's why we're going to just talk about things here and check things out. So sounds like Bryce saying I'm coming in loud and clear, which is good. Let me know where you're watching from. Also, if you've got any questions, I'll answer questions at the end. You can kind of stick them in the chat, though. But the plan is we're going to talk more about the risk, talk about those areas that may be impacted, and walk you through future track. And while we're talking about tornadoes, yes, we've had a lot of tornadoes, it seems like here, but the risk at any one particular location still is low, right? I mean, think about the risk we had, and we did get some big tornadoes in there, but there were a lot of areas that didn't have tornadoes. I think when this all is said and done, I think the chances there that a lot more areas actually will have potentially a significant flooding threat develop from this, and then some areas will see tornadoes. And so, tornadoes are, they're kind of the star of the show. Everyone wants to look at them, right? But the flooding threat really concerning to me, really stands out to me as if it could be a problem here. So that's something that I've got. So getting people to log on and check in here, and we'll kind of wait and give folks some time to let me know where they're watching and whatnot. Their comments are coming in great. I really appreciate seeing where all of you are checking in from here. And we'll just do a couple shout outs real quick. We've got Carol down in Ashmore. I know Ashmore had quite a bit of damage. So Carol, hopefully things are cleaned up where you are. We got some folks in from Charleston. Stephanie is here, and she's not feeling very good, I think, because of the storms they just had. And that's something that we'll have to deal with, right? The fatigue from these storms certainly is there. Mike is over in Shelbyville. Hey, Mike, hope you're doing good. And I'm sure the lake is quite full here. And then Mindy is in Metcalf. Debbie, man, the comments are coming in so fast, I can't keep up there. Debbie is checking in Westville. We've got Jesse down in Robinson. And we'll do two more here. We've got Rantoul Maria checking in from there. And we'll get one more shout out here when that just gives folks a chance to check on in. Jason is checking in from the Monticello area. So thanks for everyone for checking in. Okay, tomorrow we're sitting on a slight risk right now. I don't think it looks exactly like this when we wake up, and it may take some time. But we're just going to have to watch that risk tomorrow. It's there. And this type of setup is more, it kind of reminds me more of a March setup. The warm front is key here, and warm fronts in March can really cause some problems. But it's June, so that warm front's close by. We've got some instability, and the sun in March sometimes struggles to heat things up, get it cooking. We need a little extra help. We've got instability here. Now, the difference in the ingredients is, so Wednesday, we'll think of it this way. If we were thinking about making cookies, and whenever I go to school, I talk about cookies with kids, and it just makes sense, right? Well, I love cookies. To make cookies, you need a cup of flour and a cup of sugar, and it needs to be, all together. And cookies can come in different shapes and sizes and things like that. But we've got enough ingredients to make cookies. We had enough ingredients to make dozens of cookies on Wednesday. And of course, we know how that turned out for us. There's still enough ingredients to make cookies here. It doesn't mean it's going to be as big of an event, but the potential is there that we could still get some areas of rotation on here. And so the slight risk has been expanded. This morning, it was more down here. Taterville, Mattoon, Charleston, Effingham. Well, they pulled it all the way up to I-72, and the marginal risk is north of that. And the warm front's really going to be key with the specific setup as we move on through. Let me talk more about that warm front. First off, warm fronts for tornadoes, they can really enhance things. And warm front is a boundary that divides cold air to the north, warm air to the south. Often that warm air is unstable, it's humid, and that's something that we have to keep an eye on here. Something I want to do to this graphic real quick. I meant to do it earlier. I want to adjust the labels on there because it only has Champaign and Quincy, and I wasn't sure why that was the case. So we'll turn on some more. Hey, Booties. Booty is getting a shot on the map there. Let me clear them out here. And add those in so that way we can get a little bit more of an approximation of some places. So here we go. There's a list of towns that are popping up on this map. And I think this actually is about where the front should settle in. Now, it may vary a little bit, and where it exactly sets up is very important for this, because that front will divide the cooler, more stable air to the north, the warmer, more humid air to the south, the more unstable air. And it also, warm fronts have a lot of wind shear, some turbulence in there. Those warm fronts can typically allow for some more spin. And so where that ends up is going to be important, because from that line south is where the tornado risk. And I do think there's a chance for some strong tornadoes with this. There is a lot of wind shear in the atmosphere. We don't need a lot of instability to get those storms going, and they'll be able to tap into that pretty easily. And so this kind of close. Now, it could be 10 miles north. It could wobble a little bit here, but it's very important to figure out where that boundary settles in. And I think we'll continue to watch things tonight here. North of it, there's that significant flooding threat. That may end up north of 72 here. Now, we can still have flooding south, but typically along and north of warm fronts, you have a lot more rain and storm activity that's not necessarily severe, but you can get a really good setup for significant flash flooding. To the south, still again flooding, but that's where that tornado risk will play out here. And this kind of goes in line with that slight risk here. So we'll keep an eye on exactly where that front moves on through. Some things we've got to watch, though. There's some details that we kind of have to monitor, and some of that's going to be with the potential for 1 or 2 rounds of storms. Now, let's say tomorrow morning, 9, 10, 11 in the morning till noon, 1 or 2 in the afternoon. If not much is happening, typically we would see some rain and storm activity, maybe ahead of that low pressure system to the north. But if it's more dry, all that does is allows the warm front to lift farther and farther to the north there. The more north it goes, the more north the significant flood threat goes, but then that puts more of us in that tornado risk here. I tend to think there's at least some storm activity that will limit the ability for that front to progress north, and that front also is tied with the low pressure system coming in from the west. So that's something to think about there. So this may not be as likely, but even 10 miles might be the difference for some of you with a bit of a northward progression on that. And so that's something that we'll have to watch pretty closely here with scenario number 2. Under this scenario, I think this would allow for more isolated supercells across more of our area. Those are the types of storms that can produce those more strong tornadoes in our area. And so that's something we'll have to keep an eye on here, because the farther north that front goes, the more the instability can overlap with better wind shear. And the wind shear is still fine. The wind shear gets stronger and more favorable the farther north we go here. So if you've got good wind shear, but you're north of the front and there's no instability, you can't tap into that. You don't have to worry about tornadoes. If you've got instability and you're tapping into the wind shear, you have the chance for some severe weather. And that's something that we have to monitor here. Scenario number 3, this is something that probably is maybe a little more likely than the northward movement of that front here. I think that front settles in more in the central part of our area, right along the I-72 corridor. But this here would be something similar to what happened last Wednesday. We kind of thought, we had a big broad area. We thought the southern half of that risk area would be more in favor, because that morning line was a big overperformer, and it lingered, and it brought lots of rain. That can often keep the air more stable and force that front to the south. If this happens, then more of us are in the significant flooding threat. At least we're not in the tornado threat, but that tornado threat is more down towards I-70, and there's still a chance for some strong tornadoes down there regardless, I think. But the difference here is that I think if the front is more south, this may favor more of a line coming through. And instead of more individual supercells, maybe you're seeing a squall line come through that has more areas of rotation embedded in there. So we'll see how that evolves. The farther north that front gets, I think the better the chance for more individual storms is. And we can still have a mix of those in our areas, don't get me wrong. And they may also come in 2 rounds, which is the unfortunate thing there. So again, I kind of think we're going to lean here. Now, we may see this front kind of, some morning rain here, maybe pushes it south a little bit. But then after that initial rain clears, we saw that instability start to race north really quickly. This time of year, things can heat up in a hurry, and an hour of sunshine is all you need to get things cooking again. And some of those areas got that hour of sunshine really fast before that second round of supercells came through last Wednesday. Again, you kind of have to watch that here and see how that plays on out. Okay, we're going to walk through some guidance real quick here, and then we'll talk about the specific tornado risk and some changes that could come for us as we go into tomorrow morning. So first off here's some of our in-house guidance. See how it has this morning rain up here? I kind of think this makes sense, where there'll be some heavy rain and some thunder, but this is not expected to be severe from the southern edge of it northward here. Now, if you're on this southern edge, we'll have to keep an eye on that because that is close to the warm front. But as we go on through them, notice how that moderate rain kind of sticks over some of those same areas for a long period of time. That's a bit of a concern. And then this down here, more of the segments that look more north to south oriented, that's where that severe weather threat may materialize. Now, still going to keep an eye on this edge here, but under this scenario, here's my low pressure. Here's that warm front. See how that kind of divides the rain to the north to the drier air to the south there. And so maybe if you want to avoid a tornado risk, what you'd like to see is more rain filling in the morning further to the south there. But as we get to lunchtime in the afternoon, things are starting to juice up a bit down here ahead of that, right? And again, I don't want to get so locked in specific places, but we're looking at the trend here. All models are wrong. Some are useful. And I think this one's useful to evaluate things here. But the interesting thing is notice how it tries to bring some of these individual cells, and then this line here starts to almost break apart and look more broken in nature. Siri, not now. More broken in nature. These are all just going to have to be watched, right? There is some instability there. There's a lot of wind shear there. And on these types of low pressure systems, they're almost like a mini low pressure, not our big mid-latitude cyclones that bring the big, broad, severe weather risks and the big winter storms, things like that, those large scale features. This is a much more small scale feature. So we just got to keep an eye on those little details as we go into the afternoon here. And that's something to watch. We get to 3, 4 o'clock. Maybe this first stuff is clearing out, but then there's some dry time back to the west. And the question will be, is there enough time to get some additional storms to develop and linger into the evening there? And that may be something where even 7, 8 o'clock, we're still dealing with some of those storms here into the area. But I think after 9 o'clock, we're done. So I'll back it up to the beginning. Really, I think by 11 a.m., we'll have to start watching for at least some risk here. I think the risk is lower. I do think it's probably more like 1 o'clock when we'll have to really keep an eye on things. And then we maybe get the chance to wind down by 7 o'clock maybe. But by 9 o'clock, then things are really looking like they're out of here. And that, to me, kind of stands out as that time to watch for things there. Let me bring a different model up, and you'll kind of see how it looks similar. There are some differences to that. But the idea here is, okay, here's that morning rain to the north, right? Maybe that keeps areas north of I-72 from having problems. But there's a lot of dry time, and maybe this actually is a little farther north here. Here comes that line of storms, and if it's arriving after lunchtime, we're unstable ahead of that there. And so this here would bring those clusters on in. Now, this maybe looks a little more linear, but there's just little cells and spots that can kind of grow in these types of things. And here we go, 3, 4, 5 o'clock. Timing looks similar. It also is trying to develop some more on the backside there. That second later opportunity, a little uncertain, but it just means we've got to watch things here. And this one, again, it gets to 9 o'clock. We're starting to wind things down, get things out of here. But there may be additional storm activity beyond that that's south of I-70. So I kind of think compared to this morning and this afternoon, now guidance kind of starting to converge onto an idea. And there's a main reason for that. One is because these storms have already formed out in Kansas and Nebraska and Colorado and Wyoming. And let me show you the regional satellite loop here. Oftentimes, weather guidance does really badly trying to figure out what a low pressure is doing before the low pressure forms. And the classic example of that is in hurricane season, trying to forecast where a hurricane will make landfall is really difficult before there's any circulation out there, even if guidance is trying to bring that. But once we get a closed low pressure with those hurricanes, then the guidance can say, oh, there's something there. I need to start to figure out where that's going. Well, we've got that little mini low now out here thanks to these storms that are congealing together, and they're bringing some intense wind down there. There's some 80-mile-an-hour winds plus there in western Kansas. This is that morning round. See how it's kind of lining up to be north of 72 there? And then this maybe is a part that will weaken, but there'll be some additional development that kind of forms in here. And so it's looking fairly similar, I would say. One way to consider that is we look at that regional satellite here, and then we compare how the models initialize, and I think it's doing an okay job. So here's now what it is, and then so now is 10 o'clock. Oops, pressed the wrong button there. Let me go back. Now is 10 o'clock, give or take. So what does the model say is happening? at 10 o'clock. It looks close, right? There's that cluster there. Here's that rain sticking out. It's starting to be more accurate and pick up on that. And when it initializes a little better, then it makes more sense. So you can see here how that rain and storm activity comes away. And can you see the swirl here too? That's that low pressure trying to come on in and bring that activity our direction, which is why we are watching things. At this point, our tornado risk, we're calling it a 5 out of 10 for areas that are in yellow here. And that's basically everyone's along and south of I-72. And that's where we think that warm front is, right? But there will likely be some massaging and changing of that as we're seeing where the front actually ends up. We'll be able to say, okay, maybe that risk is a little higher over here, a little lower there. And that front can still wiggle around a little bit. Maybe it tries to surge north 20 miles for a period of time. But over here, that rain comes a little more southeast, pushes it south 10 miles, right? That little transition zone in here kind of sets the northern edge of that up for us. And there may be a chance where we get an upgrade. It wouldn't surprise me. I'm not sold on that idea. That upgrade may not come even until the morning update tomorrow as we watch things play out. But it wouldn't shock me if we're adding an orange area, and that's in the 7 range, the 6 area there, 7, 6. I'm not saying it the other way. I'm not catching me on that today. It may end up being in that area where we see that number added to the board. We'll see how that evolves. There's been discussion of that, but because of the lack of confidence, they haven't moved forward with that from the Storm Prediction Center. And that's where this tornado risk scale is derived from. And so that's something that is of note there. Speaking of, let me see if I can get the actual graphic up. I want to show you the actual risk and what it means. And I think I've got it saved in here. Because a lot of people tend to ask, wait, 5 out of 10, does that mean that it's a 50% chance of hitting my home? That is absolutely not what it means. A lot of times severe weather probabilities is probability forecast, right? So, the Storm Prediction Center will issue a 5% or a 10% or a 15% risk here. This scale we've developed, a 1 to 10, is a relative risk, right? It takes these numbers, it puts them in a more easy digestible thing. And it's not about the chance of you getting hit by a tornado. It's about what's the relative risk of us having to deal with tornado weather here. So in a 4 or 5, that's a risk, right? A lot of times we get those low-end events, 1, 2s, 3s. We're like, 4 or 5, we start to go, okay. When we start to see that 6 to, the top half of that scale there, I'm not saying it out loud. When we have that, then we start to think, okay, it's becoming a little bit more of a robust risk. I don't think we're going to a 9. We're not going to a 10 here. We have had events, though, that have been in the 4 or 5 range and have been very memorable. The Taylorville tornado event was a 5. We've had events since I've been here where we've had a 1, a 2, or a 3, and we've had a couple of tornadoes. We've had 8s do nothing in our region. And so it is something that we consider. Again, probability is really tough. This is a really challenging thing because it's 5% risk here. The SPC 5%, that's a 4 to 5, right? These are the numbers we use because that 5%, what it means is there's a 5% chance of a tornado within 25 miles of you at any given point in the forecast. That's a weird number, right? If I told you there was a 5% chance of rain, you'd be like, no big deal, right? But the difference is tornadoes obviously are a lot more impactful, and we could still have those warnings with things like that. The other thing is, on any given day, this is where we go down the statistics road here, and right, like stats, who likes it? Nobody does. The statistics are, on any given day, it's like 0.1 to 0.2% chance. Let's just say 0.1% chance that a tornado were to strike within 25 miles of any given point. Just a normal day. We don't care what day it is. Specifically, just statistically average here. Technically, when you have a 5%, that means the risk is 50% higher, or 50 times higher than a normal day. Blah, 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 blah. Statistic, blah, 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 right? That's messy math. Some of you are loving the math. I know that. I know I've got some friends that are math teachers out there. Some of you probably really like that. But that's such a weird and conceptually, how concerned should I be? It's a 5 out of 10. Okay, if there's some concern there. When we start to get to 7, you're like, okay, that's a problem. And when we had that 8 and bumped it to a 9 last Wednesday, that panned out to be well worth the risk given how things are here. So we're trying to avoid the math. We're trying to avoid the statistics, and we want a relative scale that just is easy to digest. If I told you, if you had to rate your favorite restaurant on a scale, or the new restaurant down there on a scale of 1 to 10, how is it? A 7. Oh, okay, that's pretty good, right? Similar idea here. It's trying to have it be more easily digestible. And so that's why we have that scale to kind of correlate things there. So again, we're sitting at a 5 out of 10 now, but the chances maybe we go some of those areas to that orange level, but we will remain, remain, will remain, I don't know what I'm trying to say here. I'm so tired. It remains to be seen whether that happens or not. And that also is something that could happen almost last second as we're seeing storms evolve. And a 5 could still bring plenty of problems out there as well. So that's something that I want to stress there. Other thing, flooding. Remember, some of us are going to deal with some flooding, I think, here. Not everyone is. The potential update from this morning and the afternoon had the medium north and the high south. I almost think that we may see the high get pulled north a little bit because we should see that flooding risk maybe along that warm front and to the north, but there will still be flooding where those storms come on through too. So count on it being a risk of flooding. And here's why. I haven't looked at the new numbers. That is a little more south than I thought it would be. Is that because I messed with it? There we go. So you get the idea here. Here's that stripe. So there's a high risk of flooding. Not everyone's going to see that flooding, but I can't tell you exactly where this is going to be. So, we could see a scenario where it looks like my numbers got messed here. So let me just reset them. Oop. Okay, so here's that warm front goes more north. Look, the flooding threat goes up with it, but there's still storm activity bringing heavy rain down south, right? If that warm front ends up way south, maybe it pulls that axis a little more south. So we have some time to kind of shift that around. But I would expect a quarter of 2 to 4 inches of rain to appear somewhere in our region. And there may be some pockets where higher amounts are. I think there's a lot of torrential downpours, given a lot of water that's in the air. These storms will really be able to tap into that. So I know everyone's like, there's a meme, I think, where, it's the guy's with his girlfriend and she's looking at him because he's looking over at another girl. And, the girl is the flash flood threat. And then he's looking over at the tornado threat. Like, we always tend to focus on the tornado threat, but a lot more of us have the potential to be impacted by that flash flooding. And I was driving around today. I went down to Newman in Douglas County, and some of those fields have standing water. The ditches are full. The rivers are up too. Kevin told me last night, he's like, yeah, coming back from Cerro Gordo, some of the rivers are up. The, couple inches of rain is a problem at this point. 3 to 6 inches of rain in some small area is a real big problem. And so there certainly could be that flash flooding potential. And just to clarify, Michelle is saying, Future Track said Tuesday, right? This is the forecast. I'm going to put this is Sunday here. If you saw Tuesday on that, the reason being is because the model goes out to Tuesday. But when I stop here, see how it's, through Monday, here comes that rain. And by the time it get to Monday morning, there it is. So that's what that means there. So yeah, it's going to rain a bunch where that warm front is, and just north of it, when storms come through, they're going to have a lot of water. I think we're going to have some pretty fast flooding potential that develops from this, even if the tornado threat is there. And these types of little systems, they can be there in a hurry. And I think there's some heightened awareness, and there's a lot of anxiety, and there's a lot of concern because so many people have been impacted this year. When you look at all of these cities here, if we were to check what towns have had an impact from a tornado here, Pontiac had 2 of them. Bloomington Normal has had them. Champaign and Danville has had them. We've had Springfield. We had Decatur. We've had Mattoon, Charleston. Effingham's been impacted. And then we've had Jacksonville was impacted last year, right? Paris was impacted a couple of years ago. The last couple of years have just been wild with tornadoes around here. So we're all experts, right? We're all A+ on the quiz for what do you do when there's a tornado warning? Get the video camera, get outside. No. Basement, right? Bathroom, hallway, closet, something like that. In, down, up is what I teach kids. So that's what we got there. So, okay, kind of recapping impacts here. Again, I think that rain and storm activity for areas along and north of I-72 begins 8 to 10 a.m., and then we'll be dealing with that coming and going through the area. For some of us, though, there may be a period of time until 2 p.m. that storms don't happen, and that's going to be where that instability is able to really pick on up here. But the flooding threat is there. A lot of torrential rain coming. Sump pumps, got to check them, got to make sure that you look at them here, where exactly that ends up. I don't want somebody to nail down and say 5 inches in Paris or 4 inches in Mattoon. there's a zone wherever these storms train where we could see a corridor of 2, 3, 4 inches with some locally higher amounts. We want to treat that as a trend and not a specific forecast there, what is guidance saying. But there are some chances that we could see some really torrential downpours and a lot of flooding. So that's why we're coming out of the gate screaming at the high there. But still, tornado threat low to medium. We'll see exactly how this system progresses and how things look overnight tonight, but it wouldn't surprise me if that picks up a little bit. And then if you get the storms too, a little more linear, that wind threat will be there. I don't see much of a hail threat. There's a lot of water. Typically, hail likes drier air aloft. So that's not as much of a concern. But we could still get some big hail on a strong storm. We didn't think there'd be a whole lot of big hail, and we still had baseballs on Wednesday. So you can still have a storm that is the case there. So that's what I got. Okay. To be weather aware, I'll be here in the studio. Kevin, I think, is planning the storm tracker tomorrow. He hasn't told me any differently from what he told me on Friday. And Adam will also be here at some point in the studio kind of watching. We're going to be here, right? We've been with you before. We've been with you every round. We're not going anywhere. And we'll continue to bring you team coverage with things here. I'll be back at, it's like 10:25, I think, is our end time. The basketball game ran late. An hour is dedicated to 48 hours, and then it's us. I'll be back at 7 a.m. on CBS WCIA this morning. I'll be back then. Probably do another Facebook Live update. Some of you, maybe your early church, may miss that. If your church goes at 10 a.m., 9, 10 a.m., probably be able to get on there. And if you're going to church and miss that, log on afterwards. It'll still be there. But then by 11 a.m. onward, we'll kind of babysit things. I think probably more likely after 1 p.m. So if you're like, oh, should I go to church or brunch, or I got to run groceries or things like that, I think you got a chance to get that done before lunch. But then particularly after lunch, things may start to ramp up. And to be fully fair as well, while this risk is there an off-ramp to nothing happening? Yes, that certainly is the case. We could be wrong, right? I was really hoping we'd be wrong on Wednesday, and I tell you what, about 5:30, I thought we were going to be, they're going to take a picture and cut my face out and put it on a goat, because at 5:30, nothing had happened yet with the day. Another event where we might be quiet, and within 30 minutes, all of a sudden, we're dealing with big time problems. And that was what happened in Coles County, right? The storm was there. By the time it became tornado warned, it was quickly ramping up, and I think in 15, 20 minutes, we suddenly went from, okay, yeah, there's storms with hail and wind, to, wow, strong tornado in a populated area. We could deal with something like that again, which is what we've got there. So it's kind of what we're dealing with. Okay, I'm going to get some water, take care of a few things. I appreciate everyone's messages too, reports and things of that. I'm not going to have a whole lot of time for questions. I might just go back and check. I was kind of keeping an eye, but that's what we're looking at here. Let me just make sure. Fine. 6-7. 6-7. There you go. I said it. And the kids at home watching with you, parents, are groaning, I'm sure. Bryce asking about, does this cold front finally push out the risk of severe weather for a while? Yeah, I think so, but I don't know what a while means to you. I do unfortunately think that the active pattern sticks around. We might get a little break, but as early as next weekend, maybe the chance returns. We'll worry about that later, right? But it does seem like more active weather coming back to the region. And, I'm not going to, at that point, you start to get too far out. You're just throwing darts at a board and seeing what happens. But general big picture, the jet stream wants to be more active nearby. We've got a lot of instability in the summer, and so that's something that's there. Melinda pointing out that the PWAT, that's the precipitable water. Basically, that's some variable that we use to measure how much water is in a column of air from the surface all the way up. And when it's 2 inches, that's torrential rain. An inch is torrential rain. So we're well over that. Usually we don't see those guys. To give you another example, in the wintertime, typically when we've got a snowstorm coming, they're like in the 1/4 to 1/2 inch range. And that can be more than enough, but just tropical moisture that'll be in place. Timing, kind of recap that. It kind of depends, but there'll be rounds of storms coming in, perhaps 2 waves. We'll get that morning to early afternoon, and then we've got that afternoon to evening time frame there. Something that we're watching there. Jen saying tornadoes that would likely wrap in rain. I actually don't know if that will be the case. Some of that's going to depend on where that warm front ends up. If storms are a little more isolated, they won't necessarily be overtly large supercells. To me, this type of setup tends to support more smaller storms that are rotating, but then we also have these just clusters that are out there. And so they might not be quite as rain wrapped as that Mattoon Charleston one. We'll just kind of have to watch here. So there could be a mixed mode of that. Some of them may also, if we get the line segment to come through, you can still get embedded rotation within that line too. So that's just something to be aware. Kind of checking some last questions here before wrapping up. Ain't this the truth? Leslie's nailed it there. What's giving you anxiety? Mother Nature. Yes. Timing app. Yeah, I can do that one time here. So we'll kind of go back. And if you're coming in late when this video posts, it'll be there. Or you can just catch my forecast tonight. And it'll be about 10:30. I think we're going at 10:28, give or take. We're after 48 hours. That's on that. So here we go. In general, again, this is not going to look exactly like this. There may be some north-south component to that. But the trend shows us, here's that morning rain more north, and that moderate rain there, the yellows and oranges and reds, sitting over some of the same areas for several hours. You know, this type of rain, you can put down an inch and a half in an hour pretty quickly. And if it's sticking around 2-3 hours, you'll have quite a bit of rain there. So here we go then. This wants to bring more storm activity here. That southern edge is something to watch. And we'll see how that plays out here. But notice how it kind of breaks it apart. And then you get these little individual cells mixed in there. Just got to watch all of that. And if you look closely here, you'll see there's this kind of spin. There's a lot of wind shear close by. We don't need much instability to tap into it. But then here we go, kind of showing the 5-6 o'clock, you know, some little cells that are more isolated and individual, and then 8-9 o'clock clearing things out of there. So that's kind of what we're leaning towards with that timing. Oh, I will. And I won't be dropping them. So don't worry about that. Seeing some questions. Is this like last Wednesday? You know, a cookie is a cookie. A tornado is a tornado, right? If you have a 3 come through your house, if you have a 1 come through your house, you still have damage. Now, clearly there are differences in the intensity and the levels of damage. But, you know, if a 1 hits your house, you're going to have a bad time, right? If a 3 hits your house, you're going to have a bad time. And you're going to be impacted by that. And I don't want to get so caught up in, are these going to be those intense tornadoes like last week here? You know, there's a chance that, yeah, we can have that. But I'm seeing just some questions comparing there. I don't want to get so hung up in that idea that it's a strength or intensity factor that is, you know, should change our decision. Oh, there's going to be weaker tornadoes. You know, oh, I don't have to shelter. You got to shelter in them, right? We got to take action. A tornado warning is a tornado warning on a Tuesday, on a Saturday, on a high risk day, on a marginal risk day. You get a tornado warning, you take action. That should just be the simple way. You get a fire alarm going off, you go outside, right? We all know what the fire drill is. Even if there's a fire or not, we take action, and then we figure out what's going on and figure out more about that. So just do that. Avery is asking, is Vinny scared of storms? No, he sleeps through those things. Sirens go off, and he's unfazed by that. Actually, when the wind came through in Champaign a week and a half ago, I think he kind of looked out the window once, and then it was like, oh, whatever, no big deal. So, Bryce asking, you know, if that line comes through, yeah, you know, will the atmosphere not recover? I mean, yeah, that could happen, but the issue is that it doesn't take much this time of year. I mean, you just need an hour of clearing for that instability to start to race back north. So, you know, if this was March, that might save us from some problems. But this time of year, it's peak sun, you know, peak of the season. The sun's the highest there is in the sky. You don't even need blue sky. You just need to thin those clouds a little bit and have some breaks, and that can be enough to give you that instability as it comes on through. I'm sick of this weather guy. I'm sick of this weather guy too. So there it is. Rebecca asking where I'll be. Again, I'm going to be here on tomorrow, and I believe Kevin's going to be in the storm tracker, unless he changes his mind in the morning. But we kind of talked like, let's wake up and see what things are and make some assessments. And if Adam needs to come in, he will for that. All good, Lane. All good. All right. Then it looks like there's a lot more questions, but I'm running out of time here. So catch my. I was just kidding, Laney. Laney, it's okay. You're good. We were just joking. I'm tired of myself. I'm ready to be off for a week, a month. You know, if we just when it was like February and January and it was drought, we were like, oh my goodness, like I could use a drought for a couple of weeks. I'll just say that there. I think a lot of us could. So. That's what we got. All right. That's what I got for you. So check with my forecast again tonight, and I'll be up tomorrow morning and keep an eye on things. So that's what we got. Laney, you're all right. I see you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't mean that. It's a good joke. I thought it was funny. So that's it. All right. See it here in a little bit on TV and tomorrow morning, and then we'll see what happens today.